Welcome to GRE Snacks, snackable episodes about the GRE exam and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, founder of Achievable. We have a $199 GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your GRE. A full textbook, tons of GRE questions backed by our memory-enhancing algorithm, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free at achievable.me, and if you like it, you can use the code PODCAST to get 10% off at checkout. Now let's get started. So today, we have Erfun Guela from GRE Compass on the show with us again. And do you just want to give a quick intro about you and your company?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. So my name is Erfun Guela. I've been a GRE tutor for the past 15 years. I have a perfect score on the exam, and I am a sole author of McGraw-Hill's Guide to the GRE, which has been out since 2013, over 100,000 copies sold. You can learn more about me and my company at grecompass.com.
Fantastic. And so really happy to have you on the show today. Today's topic is how GRE scoring works and how it should impact your study habits. And I think this is crucial. I think a lot of people don't quite understand the way that the test is structured, and this will be really valuable for them. So if you want to kick it off.
Sure. All right. So high level with how the scoring works. So it's important to understand that GRE is what's called section adaptive. So the way section adaptivity works, if we think about your quantitative sections, you're going to get two scored quantitative sections. The first scored quantitative section is going to be mostly medium level questions. Now, when I say medium level questions, what I mean is the following. Every question you see on the exam will be categorized at a level of difficulty from 1 through 5. 1 being easiest all the way up to 5, which is hardest. Your first scored section, be it quant or verbal, will be mostly medium level questions. So mostly 3s, a couple 2s, a couple 4s, maybe 1, maybe 1, 5. Your performance on that first section will then land you in one of 3 possible second sections. If you do very well on that first section, you'll get the hardest second section, which is going to be 5s, 4s, and 3s. If you do okay on that first section, you'll get the medium second section, which will be 4s, 3s, and 2s. And if you don't do so well in the first section, you'll get the easiest second section, which is going to be 3s, 2s, and 1s. Now, what's important to take away from this, sort of the next step, is the way the GRE arrives at your score. So again, just focusing on the quantitative section is scored from 130 to 170 in 1-point increments. Now, the way they arrive at that score, the composite score be a 162, 157, so be it, is, it's important to understand they don't use what's called linear scoring. Linear scoring is what you're probably accustomed to in your high school and maybe college education, whereby percentage correct corresponded to a certain grade. So like 80% B minus, 85% B, 90% A minus, and so on. The GRE is not simply paying attention to the percentage correct or incorrect. Instead, it's weighting the questions by a level of difficulty. The way we could think about it is the following. Getting a level 5 question correct is worth 5 times as much as getting a level 1 question correct. And the flip side, missing a level 1 question hurts you 5 times as much as missing a level 5. Now, the math doesn't quite work out that way, but that's just a way to sort of approximate it to conceptualize the way the scoring works. The important point, again, it's the weighting, which fundamentally missing easier questions hurts you more than missing harder questions. Getting harder questions right helps you more than getting easier questions right. So that's high level how the scoring works. Ultimately, based off of the different levels of difficulty we're getting right and wrong, they'll do a sort of weighted average, and that's going to determine your overall score. So one important takeaway from this is understanding 2 people could overall get the same percentage of questions correct, but get largely different scores based off of the actual distribution. In particular, if somebody didn't do too well in the first section, they'll get the easy second section. They might kill it. They might get like 19 out of 20, something like that. But because they're only seeing level 3s, there's going to be a ceiling on their score. Whereas somebody who sees that hard second section might only get like 12 out of 20. But because they have so many hard questions, those will be weighted more heavily. So they'll be able to see a higher score. And, one thing you can do if you've already taken the exam, if you go into your ETS account, there's something called the ETS Diagnostic Report, which is provided for free to all test takers. It's usually available a couple weeks after you take it. And it'll actually give you a breakdown by question difficulty of your entire exam. And one thing you should really pay attention to there is the level of difficulty of what you were missing. And in particular, I actually want to expand on this point.
Yeah.
Last time we talked about sort of misconceptions about the GRE, and one misconception that's tied to scoring is thinking that you really need to focus on those level 5 questions. That to get a good score, you have to just blow those out of the park. But the reality is this. One point I made earlier: missing easier questions hurts you more than missing harder questions, right? And if you think about
Yep.
a big implication of that really signifies that silly mistakes and just gaps in core content knowledge and strategies will really have a negative impact on your score. So when it comes to how the scoring should inform your studying, what you really want to pay attention to is, am I focusing too much on the hard stuff at the exclusion of some foundational topics? Very
Right.
often I'll see people who just really want to focus on probability or combinatorics or just like these more advanced concepts that they master level 5s. But then what ends up happening is you neglect the basics. Maybe you're not as strong as you should be at data interpretation. Maybe you're missing some ones and twos as a result of that. Maybe you're not efficient on quant comparison, and consequently you're spending too long on those, and then you don't have time for some of the easier discrete quant questions. Where the case may be, if you don't give sufficient attention to the conceptual and methodological foundations, you'll end up missing what I call gimmies. Gimme will call anything level 1, 2, or 3. You miss those questions, and
Hmm.
sure, you might even get some 5s right, but missing those easier ones is going to hurt you so much that it won't be offset by how you perform on those 5s. And, I say this coming from a lot of experience, having seen the diagnostic breakdowns of a lot of students. I've seen students who, took this sort of inefficient approach towards studying where they overemphasized the hard stuff, did very well in the 5s, but then made a ton of silly mistakes, missed a bunch of 1 and 2s. And somebody who was probably capable of like a 165 only got a 160 because they left so many easy questions on the table. Now, yes, that is fixable, but it's
Hmm.
something you really have to be mindful of and vigilant for, because the issue is psychologically when we're studying, these easier things we just take for granted, right? We assume like, hey, I know how to do a standard linear system of equations. I don't need to practice that and so on. You don't practice it on game day because of nerves, anxiety, and so on. You end up rushing, making a silly mistake. You miss that question. And again, it's going to have a sort of negative cascading impact on the rest of your score.
Right. And it sounds like also that essentially, if you're talking about total points that you could earn, like the easiest points are just getting the easy questions right. And also,
Exactly.
you're never going to get that harder section anyway if you don't get those easy questions right. Like that, you could be studying for something that you'll never see.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're the easy question, just again, they're so easy to take for granted. But yes, you need to. Just for your composite score, they matter a lot. But also, yeah, to Tyler's point, if you're not mastering those, you're not going to see that hard section, and then all that study you put into some of the advanced content will be for naught because like you're not going to be able to show it to the scoring algorithm
Right.
anyways.
I think the other part too is also just that like those permutations and combinatorics problems are just less frequent anyway, regardless of
Yep.
difficulty.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, exactly. Right. And it's something I mentioned last time, right? When things take more weight psychologically, it's thinking that they're going to actually matter more in the exam. And ultimately, like you can, I mean, I don't want to speak in absolutes here, but unless you're going for a 170, if you don't master every small component, probably in combinatorics, you'll be okay. I mean, the reality is that time a lot of times is better spent making sure that you're stronger at arithmetic. In particular, core things like percents, manipulating fractions, being strong at exponents, linear equations, algebra generally, and that goes a much longer way toward improving your score.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's again the high level takeaway there being making sure, and like one consequence of all of this, generally the way I recommend students structure their studying in a way that's informed by scoring is, I try to recommend doing studying in 2 phases, where phase 1 is just
Hmm.
devote, call 4 to 6 weeks, however much time you need, to developing a core foundation in the content and strategies, where there's really no hole in just your ability to get level 1s and 3s correct, right? Make sure you're just killing those. And then from there, yeah, then you can start moving on to harder concepts and harder questions. But if you're a little bit too trigger happy, dive too quickly into those harder questions, try to master those, there will be gaps in your knowledge and approach, and ultimately that will show up on testing.
Yeah, and you need to have that foundation of the, easy to medium stuff anyway to do a lot of the harder questions. And so it's just like it's all in your benefit to do it in that order. The other
Yeah.
piece of it too is what am I trying to say here? Basically, I think the other part of it also is that after your first phase, or at least maybe this is my addition to your recommendation, is after your first phase, don't just forget about all those easy problems and never look at them again while you're in phase 2 of studying. Like,
Oh
make
yeah.
sure you're coming back to and re-reviewing the stuff that you've already mastered just to make sure you've still got it and that it's still like fresh in your brain.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's just high level when it comes to studying. I mean, part of your process should always be having, allocating some component of every week to just a thorough review. What I usually recommend to students, depending on their availability for studying, but like something like on Sundays, giving yourself 2 to 3 hours of just doing a comprehensive review of questions from earlier in your preparation and make sure that, what you had mastered, you still have mastered, that you're able to, just continue developing and reinforcing on that.
Right. Great. And then anything else on how the GRE scoring should impact your study habits beyond your two-phase approach?
Well, it's similar to what we're saying. I mean, when you're reviewing questions as well in your practice tests, on the ETS website, so there are five. There's the two free practice tests for Power Prep, right? They're called ETS Power Prep,
Mm.
Power Prep 1, Power Prep 2. There are the three paid ones: Power Prep Plus 1, Power Prep Plus 1, Power Prep Plus 2, Power Prep Plus 3. That is a mouthful.
That's a tongue
and
twister, yeah.
and the nice thing about those three paid exams, I mean, it's unfortunate you have to pay for them, but they do give you more data. In particular, they do tell you the level of difficulty of what you're missing. And so if and when you take those practice exams, I recommend you should, because official practice exams are important. When you take them, pay attention to the difficulty of what you're missing. Really pay attention to, okay, I'm shooting for a 160. I got a 156. All right, why did this happen? It's easy to think it happened because you missed that random probability question or whatever. But go and really check, okay, did I miss some ones, twos, and threes? That should be priority number one. Review those first, really figure out what went wrong there and make that a priority. And then, once you feel confident that you understand that concept and that you also have proper methodology in place to not make that mistake again, then worry about those fours and fives. But be careful about doing these practice review, looking at the tough stuff, only addressing that when most likely the biggest culprit and the easiest culprit to address is missing those easier ones.
Right. That totally makes sense. Thanks very much. All right. This has been GRE Snacks, hosted by Tyler from Achievable. You can try Achievable's GRE course for free at achievable.me. And if you like it, you can use the code podcast to get 10% off.